4 men pushed dead motorcycles through a flooding Ohio storm. One of them had 40 minutes left on his heart. They knocked on the first door. A curtain moved, then closed. The second door, a man said, "Keep moving," and shut it in their faces. The third didn't open at all. The fourth was a mechanic's shop. Lights on. A man working inside. They could see him through the glass. He looked right at them, walked to the front door, and flipped the sign to closed. At door 6, a woman called the police. There's 4 of them. Big men. Tattoos. I'm scared. The deputy checked their IDs. Found nothing, because there was nothing. Then he leaned out his window and said, "Boys, this isn't a friendly stretch for folks who look like you." So they pushed on. Rain coming sideways now. The big one going gray in the face, whispering his daughter's name. Around the bend, one last light, one last door. Elias Cooper had done the same thing every morning for 43 years. He woke before the alarm, pulled on his work pants in the dark, touched the wooden frame of his father's photograph above the workbench before he touched anything else. Said quiet enough that only the garage walls could hear, "Morning, Daddy!" Then he walked next door to kiss his wife. May was already at the griddle, apron tied, coffee on, the smell of biscuits and something with sage drifting through the screen door into the gray Ohio morning. "Morning, sugar. Morning, baby. Sleep all right?" "Mm-hmm."
"Roof leaked again."
I know. Heard the bucket." She handed him a mug without looking up. 43 years. They didn't need to look anymore. The Cooper property sat on Route 9, 4 miles outside Millhaven. 2 old buildings and a tired little house behind them. Cooper's garage on one side, built by his father Samuel in 1960. May's table on the other, added in 1983 when May quit the diner in town to be closer to her husband. A narrow breezeway connected them. They ate lunch there together every single day at noon. 2 mugs, 2 plates. 43 years. It was life, a small, honest, quiet life. And it was about to end. The bank notice had been on Elias's desk for 2 months. He kept it face down. May kept pretending not to see him turn it face down. Neither of them mentioned it over coffee. Neither of them mentioned it over dinner. They were very good, the 2 of them, not mentioning the thing that sat between them and like a third person at the table. Tuesday was the deadline. Elias counted the cash box that morning. $67, 2 tens. A worn-out 50 he'd been saving in case the truck needed a new battery. He closed the box, looked at his hands. These hands had rebuilt over 3,000 engines. These hands had splinted a child's broken wrist once when a family broke down in a thunderstorm outside the shop and the nearest hospital was 40 minutes away. These hands had buried his mother, his father, his only brother. Now these hands were going to hand over the keys. He didn't tell May that yet. She knew. She always knew. But neither of them was ready to say it out loud. The competing shop 2 miles up Route 9 had been bleeding their customers for a decade. Slick signs, coupon books, a loyalty app on the phone. The young folks didn't know what a master mechanic was anymore. They knew what 15% off felt like. Elias had 4 regulars left. Mrs. Hollister, whose husband passed in spring. The Patterson kids, who brought their daddy's old truck in on Sundays and stayed for biscuits. Russ, from the gas station dish up the road, who came in once a month for an oil change and really came for the coffee. And old Frank Beaumont, 91, who brought in a 1967 Chevy pickup he never actually drove and just liked watching Elias work. That was the whole business. May's table did a little better. Truckers stopped for her sweet tea, which was famous all the way to Columbus, but not enough better. She kept a tin on the counter that read coffee. Pay what you can. Most days she lost money on that tin. Some days a trucker would drop a 20 and walk out before she could give change. That was May. She poured the coffee before she counted the coins. The hardest part of the morning came at 7:15. Their granddaughter Simone came by before school, 17 years old, top of her class. Built a working hydraulic model engine for the science fair when she was 14, which 3 engineering professors at Ohio State says that the most sophisticated student project they had seen in 20 years. Elias kept the photograph of that science fair on the wall next to his father's. 2 weeks ago, the letter had come. Purdue University, College of Engineering, admitted. She had run down Route 9 holding that letter like it was something alive. Elias had cried right there in the garage, grease still on his hands and not caring one bit. The tuition was $41,000 a year. They had $67 in the cash box and a bank notice that said Tuesday. Simone didn't know about the notice. May had made that clear. She won't hear it from me, baby. Not yet. Not until after she signs whatever she needs to sign. Let her have this. So that morning, sat the biscuit, talking about materials science and thermodynamics, and Elias sat across from her with his coffee mug and his smile and the weight of 40 pounds sitting in the middle of his chest. May watched him from the griddle. Their eyes met once. She just shook her head slow. Don't, not yet, he nodded, bit his biscuit, kept smiling. Two truckers came through at rate. Friendly fellows, knew Elias by name, paid, left. After the door swung shut, May wiped down the counter and said without looking up, "Your daddy used to say you learn who folks are by how they pay you, or how they don't." He said a lot of things. Your daddy, May said. He did. Elias drank his coffee. Neither of them said the other thing. Things how Samuel Cooper used to say about being a black mechanic in a town that wouldn't let him buy a sandwich at the diner across the street in 1963. They didn't need to say it. Some things sit in the quiet between two people who've been married 43 years. At 8:45, after Simone left for school, Elias drove up to the bank. He hadn't planned to. He was going for milk. That's what he told May. Going for milk, baby. But he drove past the grocery and turned into the bank parking lot and sat in that truck for 4 minutes before he went in. He asked to speak with someone about the notice. The loan officer was young, 30, maybe. Wore a tie slightly too tight, nodded the wrong direction, and had the careful expression of someone delivering news they hadn't personally caused. Mr. Cooper, a pause. "I have to be transparent with you." Elias waited. "Your loan was sold, yes, sir. We transferred it 6 weeks ago. The acquiring party has chosen to call the full balance due." Elias looked at the man's tie, at the knot. Too tight, like he said, like somebody had pulled it the wrong direction and the man had just lived with it. "Who bought it?" The loan officer glanced at its screen, looked at Elias, glanced away. "A private party, sir. A local business owner. Name." A longer pause. "Glenn Pruitt." Elias sat in the truck for 11 minutes after that. Engine off. Rain starting to gather on the windshield. Glenn Pruitt, who ran Pruitt's Auto up Route 9, who had been bleeding Cooper's garage for customers for a decade with his coupon books and his loyalty app and his slick little signs, who had smiled at Elias at the hardware store 3 weeks ago and said, "How's business, Elias?" like he was asking about the weather. Glenn Pruitt hadn't bought the debt because he needed the money. He had bought the debt because he wanted the land. 60 years of Cooper family on Route 9, and a man 2 miles up the road had purchased the right to end it. Not with a fight, not with an argument, just with paperwork. Quiet paperwork on a Tuesday morning that Elias didn't find out about until it was almost too late. He drove home, didn't get the milk. May was at the counter when he came in. She looked at his face the way she always looked at his face, like reading a page she had memorized but still wanted to get right. "Elias, I'm fine. You went to the bank." He didn't answer. She set down the dish towel, folded it, set it on the counter with precision. "How long do we have?" "Tuesday. That's 5 days. Yes." She nodded once, like she was agreeing to terms she hadn't been offered a choice about. Then she picked up the dish towel and went back to the griddle. They didn't speak about it again until that night. And even then, they spoke around it, the way people who love each other do when the thing is too heavy to carry straight. They spoke about Simone, about the biscuit recipe May was thinking of adjusting, about whether the truck needed a new battery before winter. They did not speak about Glenn Pruitt, not yet. But Elias lay in the dark after May fell asleep, and he thought about a man who had waved at him at the hardware 3 weeks ago. "How's business, Elias?" He thought about that wave, that particular friendliness and what it meant now. He thought about his father's tools on the wall, about the photograph above the workbench, about 60 years of Cooper on Route 9. He didn't sleep much. Saturday arrived the way bad Saturdays do in Ohio. Quietly at first, rain before noon. Not the kind that comes hard for 20 minutes and quits. The other kind. The kind that doesn't stop. The kind that fills the ditches 2 and turns the low spots on Route 9 into rivers by 3. By 4, the tornado watch was running on the radio every 15 minutes. By 5, May had pulled in her open sign and was wiping down the counter for the day. The pantry hadn't seen a customer since lunch. Elias stood bay door of the garage watching the rain come sideways across the lot. He had a transmission half apart on the bench, a job that would pay him $80. The customer wasn't coming today. The customer probably wasn't coming Monday either. He was about to flip his sign and then walk over to May's for an early supper when he heard it. Not engines, not the high clancing sound of a passenger car. Something heavier, lower, wet. 4 motorcycles being pushed, not ridden. He couldn't see them yet. Still half a mile down the road, shapes in the gray sheet of rain. But he could hear the click, click, click of dead chains. 4 men leaning into 4 big bikes, walking them up the shoulder of Route 9 like men moving something they refused to abandon. About a mile back, the road dipped into a hollow where Millhaven Creek ran under a low concrete bridge. By noon, that hollow was a lake. By the time the 4 riders came over the rise and saw it, the water was 9 inches across the road and still sissing. Cole Briggs, who everyone called Diesel, had eased his Harley down into the water at walking speed. Custom build, 4 years of his own work in that machine. He thought he could walk it through. He was wrong. Water into the air intake halfway across. Engine choked dead in the middle of the flood. The 3 men behind him made it 20 feet further before theirs went too. 1, 2, 3. Like a string of candles going out in the same breath. 4 dead Harleys. 4 men standing in chest-deep water in October in Ohio in a storm. It took them an hour to push the bikes out of the hollow onto dry road. Then they started knocking on doors. The first house had a porch light on. A woman pulled the curtain back, looked at them, shut the curtain. They knocked twice more. Okay's answer. The second house, a man in his doorway said, "You boys keep moving," and shut the door before they could respond. The third house didn't open at all. A face in the upstairs window. Then the face was gone. The fourth was a garage. Pruitt's Auto, Douglas Alta 2 mile up Route 9. Cole saw the lights on in the bay, saw the shape of a man through the glass moving under a hood. He felt the particular relief that comes when recognize a fellow craftsman. When you think, here, this one will understand, they knocked. The man looked up. He looked at Cole, at Tank, at Reaper, at Doc. He walked toward the front door and flipped the closed sign around. It wasn't even 3 in the afternoon. The fifth was a gas station. Doc went in alone, figured the others looked like too much at once. Asked for a tow. The kid behind the counter said the tow truck was out of service, said the phone line was down. Said a lot of things that weren't true while keeping his eyes on the wall just above Doc's left shoulder. The sixth was a ranch house. Nice. A swing set in the backyard. They knocked. A woman opened the door 3 inches with the chain on. They started explaining. She shut it. 2 minutes later, they heard her through the kitchen window. There's 4 of them. Big men, tattoos, I'm scared. The sheriff's deputy came out in 15 minutes. Checked all 4 IDs, ran them. Found nothing, because there was nothing to find. These 4 men were a welder, a long-haul trucker, a building contractor, and a combat medic who'd done 2 tours in Iraq. The deputy was respectful, apologetic even. But this last thing he said before driving away, "Boys, this isn't a friendly stretch for folks who look like you." I'd keep pushing. So they pushed. Another 2 miles in the rain. Soaked through, shivering, blistered. Cole coughing, going gray in the face, leaning on his handlebars because standing upright on his own had become a project requiring concentration. Doc Raines fell back beside him as they walked. He watched Cole's breathing, the way his jaw kept tight, the way his right hand kept moving to his left chest without Cole seeming to notice he was doing it. "How long since your last dose?" "I'm fine." "Cole," I said, "I'm fine. Your pills are in the saddlebag. When did you last take one?" A silence that went on too long. "This morning." "What time this morning?" Cole didn't answer. Doc looked at Tank. Tank looked at Reaper. Nobody said the thing out loud, but all 3 of them. Doc's had tours behind him, and he had watched men bargain with their bodies in the middle of situations where stopping wasn't an option. He had seen men convince themselves they were fine right up until the moment they weren't. Cole Briggs had a heart condition he'd been managing since his second tour. A valve problem the Army doctors caught on a routine exam. They prescribed medication and told him to be careful about cold, about exertion, and about exactly the kind of situation they were currently in. Doc moved close beside him, voice low, steady. "Cole, I need you to hear me. You have maybe 40 minutes before I can't make promises about what happens next. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Cole kept pushing the bike. "Yeah, then we need to find somewhere, now." Around the long bend ahead, through the wall of rain, Assassin appeared. 2 buildings, a warm yellow light in the window. Old painted letters. Some faded, some carefully touched up over the years by someone who refused to let them disappear. Cooper's Garage, May's Table, Est, 1960. Cole looked at his 3 brothers. His jaw was tight, his face was gray. His voice came out rough, like something dragged up from a long distance. "Last try, fellas." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Elias watched them come up the driveway and didn't move. 4 big men, soaked, leather vests black with rain, pushing dead bikes 1 slow step at a time. The lead one leaning on his handlebars with a kind of desperation that Elias recognized even from a distance, because he had seen it before in men whose body were running on the wrong side of empty. He stood in the bay door for 1 full second. He saw the patches, the beards, the tattoos on the necks of 2 of them. He heard in his own head every voice in Millhaven that had ever whispered about those types. He thought about the bank notice in his desk drawer. He thought about Glenn Pruitt's name on the paperwork. He thought about Simone running down Route 9 with that Purdue letter like it was something alive. 1 full second. Then the breezeway door behind him opened. May stepped out onto the breezeway in her apron, dish towel over her shoulder. She looked at the men coming up the driveway. She looked at her husband, Elias. "May, there I see what they are." She said it the way she said everything. Quiet, certain, final, bring them in. That was that. Elias pulled his coat off the hook and walked out into the rain. The four men stopped at the edge of the lot like they were afraid to come any closer until someone said they could. Like men who had been turned away enough times in the last 3 hours that they no longer trusted a lit window to mean anything. Park them under the overhang, Elias called. Out of the wet. Then come inside. The big one, Cole, tried to say thank you and started coughing instead. The cough didn't stop. The other three reached him before he went down. Elias moved fast for a 68-year-old man with arthritis in both knees. He got Cole's left arm over his shoulder and walked him toward May's table. What's your name, brother? Diesel. A pause. Cole Briggs. Okay, Cole, we're getting you inside, sir. Cole's voice was ragged. Heart. I got a heart condition from the service. My pills are in the saddlebag. Elias looked over his shoulder at the man with the medic patch on his vest. Son, his pills now. Already on it, sir. That was Doc Raines, already moving back toward the bikes before Elias finished the sentence. Inside May's table, May had already lit the wood stove in the back room. She was pulling quilts off the shelf when they came through the door, and she didn't glance up at the size of them. Didn't look at the tattoos or the dripping leather or the mud on 4 pairs of boots. She walked straight up to Cole, put one small hand on his cheek. Looked at him in the way she'd looked at Simone during 103 fever when Simone was 9 years old. Oh, baby, you're freezing. Sit down before you fall down. Cole Briggs, 45 years old, 6'3", 280 pounds. A tattoo of his daughter's name across his throat. A man who had stood in situations worse than this one and not flinched. He sat down like a child told to. She had his vest off in 30 seconds, folded it carefully across the back of the chair the way you'd handle a man's uniform. Then his soaked t-shirt. She wrapped him in a quilt she had sewn herself the winter Simone was born, and she pressed 2 fingers gently to the side of his neck to check his pulse. Where are those pills? Coming, ma'am, Doc said already through the door. She got the first tablet into Cole's with sips of warm water, sponged his forehead with a clean cloth, checked his pulse again. Her face was calm and unhurried, which was the face May wore whenever something needed her to be the calmest person in the room. Elias. She didn't look up from Cole. He's running hot. Fever building. I see it. She talked to Cole the way she talked to everyone who needed something from her, not around the situation, directly into it. Cole, you got family at home? Yes, says. His voice was coming back, warmth returning to his face by slow degrees. A daughter? He looked at her. His eyes changed completely. Lily, she's 7. Lily. May nodded like she was writing it somewhere permanent. Pretty name. You hold on to Lily. Picture her face and hold on to it. Something moved in Cole's throat. He nodded, said nothing. Which was the right response, because some things a person can only see in silence. Out in the main room, the other 3 were standing in a row dripping rain onto May's floor. Tank, Moody, 6'4", neck tattoo. Hands that could wrap around a tire iron with room to spare, currently hanging at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. Reaper Voss, 52, face like weather-beaten granite, eyes that had cataloged too many things and stopped advertising the fact. Doc Raines, 44, back already from the bikes with Cole's medication, still calculating, still running numbers in his head, though medics do when the emergency isn't quite over. May came out of the back room. Looked at the 3 of them. One look. You. A single point at each. Sit. Tank sat. 6'4" of man folded himself onto a diner stool like a scolded child. Because that was what May's voice did to people. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You're soaked. You're scared for your friend. You can't help him better than I can right now. So you're going to sit there and eat, and then you're going to let me work. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Tank said. Quiet, genuine. She put 3 plates down, fried chicken left from lunch, biscuits, gravy, sweet tea from a sweating glass pitcher poured without asking whether they wanted it. Tank bed into a biscuit. His hands were shaking. He bit it again, set it down, picked it back up. His jaw started to do something he clearly hadn't planned on, because a man his size doesn't expect his jaw to go unsteady in a stranger's diner over a biscuit. He wiped his face with the back of an enormous hand. Ma'am. His voice was not quite his. I'm sorry, just eat your biscuit, son. Maze through walls without Teprick room. Heard through walls without trying. Made it this morning. Eats best when somebody needs it. He ate it, eyes bright, jaw still working. Not making a production of it. Just a big man at a counter, in the rain, eating a biscuit that tasted like something he hadn't had in a long time. Not the biscuit itself. The thing behind the biscuit. Reaper hadn't spoken. He sat at the far end of the counter, watching May work through the pass-through window, watching how she moved around Cole, how she touched his shoulder before walking away each time, like she was leaving something good behind to keep him company. Finally, low. Not to anyone in particular. 5 doors said no to us today. May's voice came from the back, even and untroubled. I heard you. One of them called the police. I know. Ma'am, Reaper's voice dropped further. You didn't ask if we were dangerous. A pause, the sound of the stoves, rain on the windows, you were cold and your friend needed help, May's voice, plain as a wooden table. That was enough for me. Reaper turned his face toward the window. Doc Raines from the corner was quiet for a moment. 5 doors, ma'am. 6 if you count the garage up the road. Elias, standing in the doorway between the garage couch and the kitchen, went still. You know which one that was, he said. He hadn't meant to say it aloud. Doc looked at him. You do? Elias looked at the counter, at his hands. At the $67 he had counted this morning and the name on the bank paperwork. His name is Glenn Pruitt. Nobody asked him to explain. But the words came out anyway, because a man can only carry so much before the weight finds its own exit. He bought my debt, bought it from the Sanks 6 weeks ago, wants the property. I've known that man 20 years. The room was quiet except for the stove and the rain on the glass. Tank set his biscuit down. Doc looked at the floor. Reaper nodded, slow, like a man adding something to a list that had been growing a long time. At 9:45, Elias raised the volunteer fire on the CB radio. Bridge underwater. Ambulance couldn't cross until 10:30 at earliest. He explained the heart situation. The dispatcher said, keep him warm, keep him still, keep him hydrated, don't let him stand. Elias hung up and came back to the main room. May was already pulling dry clothes from the box she kept in the back closet. Old shirts of Elias's, flannels. A basin under the sink. Curtain in the storeroom for privacies, she said, like a foreman. Get out of those wet things. Doc paused at the storeroom door and looked at Elias. Mr. Cooper. He chose his words. We're used to this. People seeing the vests and the bikes and deciding before we open our mouths. We're used to it. A pause. You didn't decide? Elias was quiet for a moment. He was thinking about his father about 1963, about the story Samuel C. Cooper had told him once, only once, about walking across the street from his own garage to the diner for a cup of coffee and being told to use the back entrance. His own garage, his own street. He'd told it once, never again. But Elias had carried it every year since like a stone in his coat pocket. The particular weight of it, the way it never got lighter. Get out of those wet clothes, son. At 10:15, the ambulance came. The water at the bridge had dropped enough to cross. The paramedic checked Cole's vitals in the back room while May held his hand. Before they wheeled Cole out, the paramedic said something to May quietly. Ma'am, those pills and the warmth. Another 20 minutes out there and we'd be having a very different conversation tonight. May just nodded. She held Cole's hand at the doorway and he held on with both of his, Mrs. Cooper. His voice was rough but present. Your full name. I need it, May Cooper. That's my husband, Elias. He said both names 3 times under his breath. Low, like a man committing something to a place he doesn't lose things. Reaper pulled an envelope from inside his vest at the door. Everything the 4 of us had between us. $2,000. He set it on the counter. May picked it up, set it right back. Honey, put that away. We helped because you needed it. Money's got nothing to do with it. Reaper's jaw worked. He looked at her for a long moment. Nobody stops for us, he said. May met his eyes. Well, just that. Just well. But the way she said it carried everything that needed saying. I see you. I see who you actually are. And I'm not surprised someone finally stopped because someone always should have been. At the door, Doc Raines stopped. Looked at Elias with the careful precision of a man who has decided something needs to be said and is going to say it cleanly. The garage, 2 miles up. Pruitt's auto. We knocked. We could see him through the glass, working. He looked right at us. Doc's voice was level. Then he walked to the front door and turned the sign. While we were standing there watching him, Elias said nothing. It wasn't like the houses, Mr. Cooper. The houses, those folks were scared. Fear I understand, I've been scared. Doc looked at the door, then back. He wasn't scared. He made a choice. Elias looked at his hands, the hands that had rebuilt 3,000 engines, that had written a check every month for 43 years to a bank that had sold his debt to the man 2 miles up the road. I know he did, Elias said. Doc nodded once, went out into the rain. The bike stayed in the lot, tarped. The men were gone by midnight. By 11, Elias and May were sitting in the breezeway with 2 mugs of coffee, the wood stove ticking, the rain still going outside, neither of them talking much. You okay, baby? Thinking. About Glenn Pruitt. Not a question. Elias looked at the door where Doc had stood. At the dark lot where 4 strangers had pushed dead bikes up a gravel drive and a woman had wrapped one of them in a quilt she'd sewn herself. I've known that man 20 years, May. I know. He waved at me at the hardware store 3 weeks ago. How's business, Elias? He shook his head. How's business? May put her hand over his on the table. He turned his hand over and held hers. Outside, the rain came down on Route 9, on the sign, on the tarped bikes, on the garage that Samuel Cooper had built in 1960 and his son had kept alive by the grace of his hands and his stubbornness and his wife. What Elias couldn't know, sitting there with May's hand in his, was that 60 miles south in a hospital room, Cole Briggs was already on the phone, saying two names, saying them to a man named Bones Sutton, whose voice sounded like gravel run through a cement mixer, saying May and Elias and Route 9, and they didn't even flinch. And the man on the other end was already making calls. 60 of them, before morning. Morning, sugar. Morning, 43 years, still the same. Sunday came up cold and still. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn. Ellis knew because he'd been awake when it stopped, lying in the dark, listening to the silence where the rain had been. That particular quiet that follows a storm, heavy. Waiting for something it hasn't named yet. He was in the garage by 5:40. Not because he had work waiting. He had work waiting, but that wasn't why. He went because the garage was where he went when something was sitting on him and he needed walls around him that understood. Yeah, Samuel's walls. His father's concrete floor cracked in 3 places and patched twice, still holding. He touched the photograph above the workbench. Morning, Daddy. Put the coffee on. Stood in the bay door with the mug and looked at the lot. 4 tarped motorcycles, rain-dark gravel, the overhang still dripping. He looked at the shapes under the tarps and thought about Cole Briggs saying, Lily, she's 7. The way his eyes had changed when he said it, not softened exactly, opened, like a door swinging in. He thought about what the paramedic had said to May. Another 20 minutes. He thought about 20 minutes. What 20 minutes looks like from the inside of it. How it can be the distance between a man seeing his daughter again and a daughter growing up without her father. How thin that margin was. How many times a day that margin exists in the world, invisible, unremarked, and how most of the time nobody on either side of it even knows it was there. He drank his coffee, watched the lot. Didn't count anything. May opened May's table at 6:30 like every other Sunday for 43 years. 2 truckers came in at 6:50. Earl from the feed company out of Akron. Friendly fellow, knew Elias by name. He leaned an elbow on the counter and said what people in these small towns say when they've heard something and want to hear the rest of it without appearing to want to hear it. May, my buddy was driving past here last night around dark. Said he saw bikers at your place. Big fellows, tattoos, a pause shaped like concern. You all right? May wiped a coffee ring off the counter. One of them was, sick how, sick and you gotta be careful with folks like, Earl? Earl raised both hands like a man surrendering something small. Yes, ma'am. She refilled his coffee. Didn't say another word about it. And Earl, who was not a stupid man, understood that the conversation had reached its natural end and ate his second biscuit accordingly. The truckers left at 7. May wiped down the counter. Elias came through the breezeway door with his seconds cup and sat at the far stool. They didn't speak for a while, just occupied the same space the way they always did. Like 2 pieces of furniture that had been in the same room so long they'd started to belong to each other. Then the phone rang. May picked it up. May's table? Mrs. Cooper? Yes, baby. It's Doc Raines, calling from the hospital. She set the dish rag down, slow and deliberate, the way she set things down when she needed both hands free for what was coming. How is he? He's gonna be all right, ma'am. Cardiac team caught everything. Stabilized overnight. He's awake and talking. A brief pause. First thing he asked when he could talk was whether you and Mr. Cooper were okay. May turned her back to the counter, walked into the storeroom with the phone. Her eyes had gone bright in the way they did when she was not going to cry in front of anyone and needed a wall between herself and the room to manage it. You tell him we're glad. You tell him to rest and not be stubborn about it. I will, ma'am. Doc's voice was careful, the way it got when he was choosing what came next. Mrs. Cooper, something else. Some folks might come by your place over the next few days. What folks? Just brothers. Another pause. What you two did Saturday night? That kind of thing doesn't stay quiet. Not with us. May stood in the storeroom after Doc hung up, phone in her hand, looking at the shelf of extra napkins and the box of sugar packets and the spare coffee filters stacked in a row like small white columns. Brothers. She didn't know exactly what that meant, but she tucked it into her apron pocket along with the card Doc had slipped under the coffee tin Saturday night. 2 words on the front, Iron Ridge MC, a phone number underneath. She walked back out. Elias was coming through the garage door at the same moment. Their eyes met across the counter the way they'd been meeting across counters for 43 years. Elias, yeah. He's all right, baby. Elias put one hand on the doorframe, let out a breath that had been somewhere fair in his chest since 10:15 the previous night. Slow and complete, like a pressure valve finding its release. Praise God. She nodded. She didn't tell him the rest yet. The part about brothers coming. She wasn't sure what it meant in practice, and she believed in a nothing thing before she handed it to someone else to carry. She tucked it alongside the card in her apron pocket and went back to work. Monday morning, May opened at 5. Before the coffee finished brewing, before the first trucker pulled off Route 9, she found it. A box on the front porch, plain brown cardboard. No tape, no label. She bent down and lifted the flap. Inside, a roll of high-grade electrical tape still in the sleeve, 2 oil filters in original packaging, a fresh tube of brake cleaner, a bag of clean shop rags, $50 of supplies at minimum, probably more. No note, no card, nothing. She carried it inside, set it on the counter, stood there looking at it the way you look at something that doesn't quite make sense but feels important anyway. Then she went and got Elias. Somebody left this. Elias looked at the box, looked at May, looked at the box again. Who'd leave this? I don't know, baby. Customer? Somebody dropping off what they could pay for last time? Maybe. He went back to the garage, but she didn't put the box away. She left it on the counter where she could see it, looked at it 3 more times before lunch. The 4th time she looked at it, she thought about what Doc had said on the phone. Brothers. Coming, she put the lid back on the box, said nothing to Elias. Monday evening, 2 men she'd never seen pulled into the lot in a clean pickup truck. They came inside, polite, no vests, no patches, work boots worn in the honest way. They ordered sandwiches and coffees and asked how long the diner had been on Route 9. One of them said, "Mind if I get a picture of the sign outside? My wife collects photos of old roadside places." "Go right ahead," May said. He went out, took 2 photographs, came back and finished his sandwich without mentioning it again. They left a $50 on a $12 order and walked out before she could say anything about change. She showed Elias the bill that evening. "Some folks are just generous," he said. But she put the 50 in a separate envelope, not the register, not the cash box. A separate envelope she slid into the kitchen drawer where she kept things that needed thinking about. Tuesday morning, the day the bank notice came due. Elias drove up to Russ's gas station for milk. He stopped in front of the corkboard by the door, the one he'd walked past 100 times without reading. A faded flyer, corners curling. He'd seen it before the way you see wallpaper. This time he read it. Iron Ridge MC Annual Toy Run, benefiting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The Iron Ridge MC has donated over $220,000 since 1997. The logo at the bottom, a skull with wings. The same design that was painted on Cole's gas tank. Elias stood there for a while. Russ came over with the milk. "That flyer's been there forever," Russ said. "Some kind of tax thing, probably." Elias looked at Russ, looked back at the flyer, looked at the number, $220,000. Since 1997 for Children's Cancer Research. He walked out without answering. He drove home with the milk and the number turning over in his head and the name Glenn Pruitt sitting in the same place it had been sitting since Saturday. He thought about 4 men pushing dead bikes in a storm. He thought about a man who looked through glass at 4 people who needed help and turned a sign around. He thought about Russ saying tax thing with that particular dismissive certainty that comes from never having needed to know better. Tuesday afternoon, a reporter called. "Mr. Cooper, I'd like to talk to you about." He hung up, pulled the curtain on the bay window, went back to the transmission on the bench. The work was the same as it had always been. The transmission didn't know about bank notices or viral stories or 60 motorcycles potentially headed down Route 9. It just needed what it needed, and Elias's hands knew how to give it. That was something. On a Tuesday like this one, that was quite a lot. He worked through the afternoon. May brought him lunch at noon in the breezeway. 2 mugs, 2 plates. The same as always. They ate without talking much. The breezeway held a quiet between them the way it always did, like a room specifically silence that 2 people love each other have earned. After lunch, she said, "You all right?" "Working on it." She took the plates back. He went back to the transmission Tuesday, 11:46. May's phone buzzed on the kitchen table. She picked it up, squinted at the screen. The text was from Doc Raines. "Mrs. Cease, open at 6 tomorrow morning, please. Got some brothers coming through. Don't be scared. They look worse than they are." She read it twice, sat down at the kitchen table, read it a 3rd time. Then she walked into the bedroom and showed it to Elias. He read it. Read it again. Set the phone down on the nightstand. "How many brothers?" "Doesn't say. Don't be scared. They look worse than they are." He looked at the ceilings. That is not a reassuring sentence. "No, May!" "Yeah." He looked at her. "What do you think?" She looked at the phone, at the box of supplies she'd left on the pantry counter since Monday morning, at the 50 in the kitchen drawer, at her husband's face in the dark. "I think," she said, "we're going to need a bigger pot of coffee." At 5:58 Wednesday morning, May Cooper brewed 3 pots instead of 1. Elias was outside by 6, dragging the trash can to the side of the lot. Kept glancing toward the highway every 2 minutes without meaning to. He'd put on his good work shirt, the dark blue one May had given him for his birthday 3 years ago. The one he wore when something mattered, and he wanted to show up for it properly. May noticed from the window. She always noticed. She didn't say anything. The mist hung low across Route 9, sky the color of old pewter. The lot was empty. Was empty. Subtle spurred sombered somewhere and the highway going on without them, indifferent and constant. Then Elias stopped moving. He set down the trash can, stood straight. Because he heard it. Low at first, far off, coming from the south like weather. Then more of it. Then more on top of that, layering building, until the sounds stopped being individual engines and became something else entirely. A wall of it, a front moving up the road, the kind of sound that doesn't so much arrive as arrive inside you, vibrating in the chest before it fully reaches the ears. May stepped out of the pantry doorway, dish towel still in her hands. She walked to the edge of the breezeway and stopped. The mist broke. 60 Harleys. 60! Coming up Route 9 in tight formation, 2 and 2, like a military parade that hadn't told the town it was coming. Behind the bikes, 3 pickup trucks stacked with toolboxes and lumber, a flatbed carrying roofing materials, bundled and strapped. 2 contractor vans, one marked Sutton & Sons Construction, the other Ridge Roofing LLC. A food truck with a crow painted on the side. A man with a camera hanging from his neck and an Iron Ridge vest on his back riding in the bed of the last truck. They pulled into the lot in formation, engines idling, the sound of it everywhere at once. In the gravel, in the walls, in Elias Cooper's chest like a second heartbeat, then a hand signal. Nobody saw it given, but every engine cut at the same moment. Silence dropped on the property like a blanket falling from a great height. Suddens, total, the kind of silence that has... 60 bearded men in leather vests stood in Elias Cooper's driveway. 60 pairs of boots on his gravel, 60 patches, skull logos, chapter rockers, names stitched in white thread. Forearms tattooed to the elbows, and all of it, every single piece of it, standing in the lot of a 68-year-old mechanic on Route 9s at 6 in the morning like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. Which it was. The lead rider swung off his bike, not young, not trying to look it, silver beard down to his sternum, head shaved clean. Dark glasses, in a flat morning light, the patch on the back of his cut read VP, a tattoo of a crow climbing up the left side of his neck. He walked across the gravel, one deliberate step at a time. Stopped in front of Elias. Stuck out a hand the size of a hardback Bible. Mom tattooed across the knuckles. You Elias Cooper? Yes, sir. Sabone Sutton. Iron Ridge MC Slumpus Columbus hat chapter. A pause. You the man who brought Cole Briggs in and out of that storm Saturdays? My wife and I? Yes, sir. Then shake my hand, brother. Before I get emotional and embarrass myself in front of 60 grown men, Elias shook it. Bones's grip was iron. He held it 3 seconds longer than a handshake, pulled back, cleared his throat hard. Damn allergies. He turned to the voices parade ground flat. All right, y'all know why we're here. Tools out, mouths shut, work fast. We got till sundown and nobody gives Mrs. Cooper's customers a hard time. Park the bikes around back. Take off your bandanas if she asks. We are guests here. Act like it. The convoy started moving like one organism, tarps pulling back, ladders going up, toolboxes hitting the ground. The flatbed began unloading lumber with the quiet efficiency of men who have done serious work before and don't require instruction or applause. Then Elias saw him, coming out of the passenger side of the lead truck, moving slowly, carefully, left leg in a walking cast, a crutch tucked under his right arm, but moving. Grinning with the particular quality of a man who nearly didn't get to grin anymore and was not going to take a single one for granted. Cole Briggs, May, came down off the breezeway. One hand went to her mouth. She walked toward Cole the way she walked toward everything that needed her. Steady, no hesitation, no performance. Cole stopped 2 feet in front of her. He was 6'3" and 280 pounds, and he bent his head down like a man approaching something sacred. Mrs. Cooper. His voice came from somewhere deep and deliberate. My daughter's name is Lily. She turned 7 last month. Saturday night I was supposed to leave her without her daddy. He stopped. His voice held barely. You gave her daddy back. He started crying. Right there, in front of 60 Stin. Not quietly, not politely. The kind of crying that lives in a man for a long time before it finds a way out. Raw and real, and the most human thing in the lot. May Cooper pulled that enormous man down into her shoulder and held on. He sobbed once into her apron, hard, complete, the kind that comes from somewhere a man doesn't let people see, and she held him like he weighed nothing at all. The 60 men in the lot suddenly found their toolboxes required urgent attention. Every single one of them. Bones stood beside Elias. He'd taken off the dark glasses. His eyes were red at the rims. "That is the toughest man I have ever known, Mr. Cooper." His voice had dropped. 2 tours overseas. Hasn't cried since his mother died. In 2009, he stopped, jaw working. "You and your wife broke him in the best way a man can be broken." Elias couldn't speak. He just watched his wife hold a stranger like she'd known him her whole life, which was exactly who May Cooper was. Had always been. Would always be. Bones cleared his throat. "I'm not going to make a speech. Hate speeches. But my brother took me from a hospital bed Sunday morning. Told me 5 doors said no to him that day. Said the deputy came out and ran their IDs. Said a man in a garage looked right through the glass and turned his sign while they stood watching." He paused. "Then he told me about you two. Said you didn't ask what club, didn't ask for anything. Said your wife called him baby before she knew his last name." He looked at the garage, at the hanging gutter, the missing shingles, the sign leaning another degree toward the road. "Folks, look at us, Mr. Cooper. They see the patches and the beards, and they decide we deal drugs. They decide we beat our wives. They decide we're trash, not worth the trouble of a door." His jaw tightened. 5 people proved them right Saturday by leaving my brother in the rain." A pause. "You didn't decide. You just opened the door." Behind him, men were already on ladders. Reaper Voss had his crew pulling rotten siding off the garage exterior. The sound of compressors starting up. The smell of fresh lumber cutting through the morning air. Cole had found his composure, standing beside May now, crutch under his arm. "Steed ear, Mr. Cooper." He nodded toward a man walking up from the construction van. "Quiet, solid, work shirt, no vest. Reaper owns Sutton and Sons Construction. Labor and materials top to bottom, both buildings." Another man came forward from the roofing van, younger. Tank's build, Tank's eyes. That's Tank's older brother. His father runs Ridge Roofing. He's doing your building roofs. Cole looked at the house behind the 2 buildings and the house. May's hand went to her mouth again. Slower this time. She had not told anyone the house roof leaked. Not Simone, not the truckers, not Earl from Akron. She had managed it with buckets and patience for 6 winters. And she had not told a single soul because there was always something more pressing, and because telling someone meant asking for help, and asking for help meant admitting the gap between what they had and what they needed. How did you know?" she said. Cole looked at her. "Saturday night while you looked at her simply. Saturday in care of me. You mentioned the bucket in the bedroom. You said it like it was just something you sieved with." He held her gaze. "You don't have to live with it anymore." May covered her face with both hands. Both hands! Which for May Cooper was the equivalent of anyone else collapsing entirely. Bones looked at Elias with something close to satisfaction. "Where's the coffee, Mr. Cooper?" "My wife makes the coffee." "Then get your wife freed up so she can make it, because 60 men are about to be very thirsty, and I have been hearing about her coffee since Sunday morning." The work began, and the work did not stop. That first Wednesday alone, 60 men ripped out the rotten siding on the garage exterior, hauled a full dumpster of broken shingles, tore out the damaged interior drywall on the east wall, and put a fresh concrete pad in front of both buildings before the sun went down. Elias stood in the middle of it all, with a cup of coffee, and the feeling of a man watching something he doesn't quite have language for yet. Men who had never met him, working on a building his father had built in 1960. With the kind of care that comes from respecting something without being told to. By the second day, Sutton and Sons had the garage stripped to the studs. That was when Tank found it. He was pulling out a section of the old interior wall, plank and lath construction, the kind nobody does anymore. He pried back a section of lath near the base of the east wall, and something fell out onto the concrete floor. Not insulation, not old newspaper. Not the things you usually find inside walls of a building from 1960, a board, small, 8 inches by 4, rough cut. Words burned into it with a wood-burning tool, the patient kind of work a man does at night when he has time to think and something he needs to say that doesn't have anywhere else to go. Tank picked it up, stood there, called across the bay. "Mr. Cooper." Elias came over. He looked at the board in Tank's enormous hand. He read what was burned into the wood. This shop was to stay open, especially when it's hardest. Below it, in the same careful burned letters, "Samuel Cooper, 1960. Elias stood there, didn't move for a long time. His father had put it inside the wall, not on display, not above the workbench where people could read it and nod and move on. Inside the wall, hidden. Like a foundation stone that holds everything up without ever being seen. Samuel Cooper had written that in 1960 and sealed it inside the wall of the building he was raising with his own hands, in a town that wouldn't let him buy a sandwich at the diner across the street, and he had never mentioned it to anyone. He had just built the building and put the words inside it and let them hold. May appeared at Elias's shoulder. She'd come from the pantry at some point. He hadn't heard her. She looked at the board, read it once, put her hand flat on Elias's back, between his shoulder blades, and left it there. Neither of them said anything. Because what do you say? What do you say when you are standing in the ruins of something you nearly lost, and you find out that the man who built it left you a message? Left it inside the wall where no one would find it unless the wall came down. Left it there in case the worst ever happened, in case someone had to tear it apart. In case his sons or his son's son or whoever stood in this bay when the hard time finally arrived needed to know that the building had always known what it was for. Tank set the board on the workbench with the same care he would have given a living thing. Turned around, found something in his toolbox that needed immediate attention. The men nearby did the same. Bones stood a few feet back, hands in his pockets, jaw working. He didn't say anything either. He just stood there and witnessed it, which was the right thing to do. Elias picked up the board, looked at it a long time. Then he set it on the shelf above the workbench, next to his father's photograph, the two of them together. He went back to work. Nobody mentioned it again that day. But everyone in that garage knew it was there. The scholarship conversation happened on day 6. Bones came boozed the breezeway at noon and set a manila envelope on the table where Elias was eating lunch. Dropped it flat and stepped back with his arms crossed like a man who has done something he knows is right and is prepared to defend it. Brothers voted. Elias wiped his hands on a rag, opened the envelope. Official stationery, the Iron Ridge MC Community Foundation. He read it slowly. Simone Cooper, Purdue University, College of Engineering, full scholarship, 4 years. Tuition, books, housing, stipend. Total value, $96,000. Funded by member contributions. He read it again. Put it down, picked it back up, his eyes filled. Not the polite kind, the kind that spills. Tears ran down his face into his coffee, and his hands forgot they could do something about that, so they just sat there on the table while it happened. Bones, don't go soft on me, Cooper. Bones, sign the paper. Elias set the pen down. Bones looked at the pen, looked at him. What? One condition. Of course there is. The voice of a man who has just driven 2 hours to give someone a life-changing gift and is now being told there are terms. What is it? Make it permanent. Elias looked up. Every year. 1 scholarship. Trade school. Engineering. Culinary. Doesn't matter as that. He held Bones's 1 rule. Every recipient does 1 free job per year for someone who can't pay. For the rest of their career. Forever. It doesn't stop with Simone. Bones stared at him across the table for a long moment. Outside, nail guns and compressors and the sound of 60 men rebuilding something. Inside, 2 men and a table and a pen. You are a genuine pain in the backside, you know that? Yes, sir. Sir. Where am I supposed to find board votes for a permanent structural change to the foundations? I'll wait. Cooper, I'll wait, Bones. The pause that followed lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Fine. Bones pulled a pen from his vest pocket, clicked it once, set it on the table to his. Done. I'll handle the board Monday. Signs before I reconsider. Elias. Signed. Bones clapped him on the back hard enough to make him cough, which was intentional, and they both knew it. That evening, the crew knocked off at sundown. The lot emptied slowly. Trucks pulling out. The sound of 60 engines starting up in sequence and facing south toward the highway. Then silence again on Route 9. Clean silence, the kind that comes after work. Elias was in the bay alone at 9 o'clock, sitting on a stool, his father's board on the shelf above the workbench. Coffee gone cold in the mug beside him. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just being space. Headlights in the lot. He recognized the truck before the engine cut. He'd seen it 2 miles up Route 9 every working day for 20 years. Glenn Pruitt sat in the lot with the engine running for a while. Long enough that Elias thought he might just pull back out and go. Then the engine went off. The door opened. Glenn Pruitt walked into the garage. He was 55, medium height. The look of a man who had worked at being a certain kind of person for long enough that it had become the person. He stood in the bay door with his hands in his jacket pockets and didn't say anything for a moment. Elias didn't offer him a chair, didn't say anything either. Glenn reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope thicker than a letter. He walked to the workbench and set it down without ceremony. The loan paper was His voice was flat, honest, discharged. I called the title company this morning. It's done. Elias looked at the envelope. Did not pick it up. Why? Glenn didn't answer right away. He looked at the wall. At Samuel's tools hanging in their original spots, replaced by 60 strangers who'd been given explicit orders to put every single one back exactly where it was. He looked at the board on the shelf above the photograph. Then he sat down. Not offered a seat. Not asked. He just sat on the stool by the compressor, and it was the first time Glenn Pruitt had sat down inside Cooper's garage in 20 years of being 2 miles up the road. My father ran a shop in Columbus, he said. 1974. A man came in looking for work. Best pair of hands my father ever saw. He told me that. Said he could see it in 5 minutes the way the man moved around an engine. Glenn looked at the floor between his feet. He turned him away. No particular reason he ever admitted out loud. He just turned him away and hired somebody else and didn't think much about it for a long time. Elias waited. He thought about it at the end. He said it once, out loud, in a hospital room. Alone, he thought. But I was there. I heard it. 2 days before he died. Like, Glenn's jaw worked. Just one time, but he said it. The garage was very quiet. I bought your debt because I wanted your road frontage. Glenn said it plainly. The way a man talks when he has decided that the least he owes is the unvarnished version of himself. I wanted to expand. I saw an opportunity and I took it, and I did not think about your father building this place in 1960. I did not think about 43 years. A pause. I thought about what I wanted. He stood up. Saturday night, I looked through the glass of my garage. 4 men in the rain. And I walked to my front door, and I turned the sign around while they were standing there looking at me. His voice stayed level, not performing remorse. Just reporting it. The way you report something that happened, because not reporting it would be its own kind of lie. I've been seeing that moment every time I close my eyes since Saturday night, Mr. Cooper. And every time I see it, I see my father's face where mine should be. He moved toward the door. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not certain I'd forgive me. He stopped at the bay door. Didn't turn around. I just couldn't let a bank take this place. Not after he stopped. Not after what I did. He walked out. The truck started. Headlights swung across the bay wall. Then the sound of the engine fading north up Route 9, back toward the shop 2 miles away, and the lot was dark and quiet again. Elias sat alone in his garage for a long time, his father's board on the shelf. This shop was built to stay open, especially when it's hardest. A man named San Samuels who burned those words into wood in 1960 and hid them inside a wall in case someone ever needed them. A man named Glenn Pruitt who heard his father say sorry once out loud in a hospital room 2 days before dying, and carried that for 20 years before it finally outweighed what it was competing against. He thought about how long things travel. Guilt, debt, silence. The moment of apology that never gets said until it's almost too late, and sometimes later than that. He sat there until May called from the pantry. Elias, coffee's going cold. He stood up, put his hand on the shelf beneath the board, not touching it, just near it. Then he walked next door. 2 mugs, the breezeway, the night air cool and clear, the rain long gone, stars above Route 9. May knew something had shifted in the garage tonight. She could read him the way she read weather, not by looking directly at it, but by feeling the change in the air before it arrived. Wow. Wait. Glenn Pruitt came by. She set her mug down. Careful. He discharged the loan, a silence. His father, Elias, said, Columbus, 1974. Same story, different man. He turned his mug in his hands. He heard his father say sorry for it, once, in a hospital room. May looked at the highway for a while, at the stars above it. Did you say anything to him? No, are you going to? Elias thought about it. Not yet. May picked her mug back up. They sat. The night was clear. Stars above Route 9, above the new siding going up on the garage. Above the stack of roofing material waiting for tomorrow's crew. Above the sign Sutton Sons, it's quietly waiting on day 3, without being asked because it was leaning and they had the tools and it was the right thing to do. The next morning, Preacher Mason and found Elias. Earl Mason, 72, a face like leather left in the sun too long and then appreciated for it. A vest so covered in patches it had become more patched than fabric. He came around the corner of the garage on day 6 with 2 cups of coffee, both black, and sat on a milk crate beside Elias without asking. They drank for a minute, not talking, just watching the crew work. 2 men who understood the value of sitting next to someone without needing to perform. Then Mason said low and easy, like a man reading from something he'd prepared a long time ago, My father ran a body shop in Mansfield, 1971. A black mechanic walked in looking for work. Best hands, my old man, ever himself, 30 years later, told the man he didn't have anything for him. Sip. He took a long sip, set the cup down on the gravel between his feet. My father said sorry for it out loud. Alone, he thought. Hospital bed. Night before he died. I was in the hallway. I heard it through the door. He stood up, slow. The way a man stands when his knees have more miles on them than they were built for. Folks look at this vest, Mr. Cooper, and they see a scary old white man on a motorcycle. Folks look at you. They see what their grandfather taught them to see. He looked at the 60 men working on the garage and the pantry and the roof of the house behind them. Some of us riding down here this week. It's a couple of generations late. From both sides, he stuck out his hand. Earl Mason. They call me Preacher. Elias shook it. Preacher walked back toward the work without looking back. Elias sat on the milk crate for a long time after, thinking about Mansfield and Columbus and a Saturday night in 1974 and a man named Samuel who hid a message inside a wall and never told anyone it was there. Thinking about how many stories were traveling right now that he would never hear. How many hospital rooms? How many last words said to empty air that were meant for something down the road? How many of them were about a door? He sat there until the coffee was cold. Then he went back to work. Because there was work to do. And the work was still the same as it had always been. And his father's tools were on the wall where they belonged, and the board was on the shelf, and the shop was still open. By Wednesday evening, word had moved through Mill Haven the way word moves through a small town, fast, sideways. In the parking lot of the hardware store, and over the counter at the gas station, and through the window of every shop on the main road that had watched 60 Harleys roll through at 6 in the morning. Glenn Pruitt heard it before noon. He didn't come in that day, or the next. But Elias noticed on Thursday morning that Pruitt's auto had fewer cars in the lot than usual, and on Friday, Mrs. Hollis drove past Pruitt's without slowing down and pulled into Cooper's instead. She didn't say anything about it. She just handed Elias her keys and said, "I heard you had some company this week." "Yes, ma'am," Elias said. "Good company, I hope." "The best kind," he said. She nodded once. "Like that settled something. 11 weeks. That's how long it took. 11 weeks of steady progress, with weekends off and coffee breaks on schedule. 11 weeks of rotating crews showing up before sunrise. Of nail guns starting at 6 and not stopping until the light ran out. Of May making biscuits every morning for however many men appeared that day. Sometimes 12, sometimes 30, sometimes just Reaper and 2 guys from his crew who had driven for hours because they had a Saturday free and they knew where they were needed, and that was enough reason. 11 weeks of Elias standing in the middle of his father's garage, watching it become something new without losing anything old. Because that was the instructions Bones had given on day one, loud enough for everyone in the lot to hear. Nobody touches the daddy's wall, and nobody did. Every wrench Samuel Cooper had hung on the back wall in 1960. Every spanner, every soldering iron with a worn wooden handle, every tool with a story only Elias knew. Each one was moved temporarily, photographed, cataloged. The man who did the cataloging was named Chip, a retired librarian from Canton who had joined Iron Ridge MC at 61 because his cardiologist told him stress was killing him, and it turned out that riding a motorcycle fixed that considerably. He documented each tool with the precision of a man who understood that some things only look like objects. When the new wall went up, fresh drywall, mudded smooth, painted, every tool went back. Exact same spot, exact same order. Chip had a photograph for each one, and he checked every placement twice. Elias walked in the morning they finished it, stood in front of that wall with his hands at his sides, looking at his father's tools the way you look at someone's face after a long absence, making sure everything was still there, making sure nothing had been lost in the translation. Nothing had. The pantry got the same treatment, 6 new booths with cushions that didn't punish your back after 20 minutes. A commercial coffee station that could pull a proper espresso but also just make regular coffee the way May always had, which was what mattered. A new griddle, larger, commercial grade, donated by a member named Curtis who owned a restaurant supply warehouse in Cleveland and who, when Bones told him what it was for, had it loaded on a truck before Bones finished the sentence. The breezeway between the 2 buildings was rebuilt entirely. Proper roof for it now, ceiling fan, 3 sides of lattice with climbing roses planted at the base, the kind that come back every spring without being asked. May had mentioned wanting a porch garden once, years ago, to Elias in the dark, not as a complaint or a request. Just a thought that came out and then went back in because there was always something more urgent. Someone had heard it. She didn't know who. She never asked. She just came around the corner one morning in week 7, stopped walking. 3 raised flower beds with fresh soil, 2 rose bushes staked and watered, a wooden bench painted white, and a small wooden sign on a stake in the nearest bed. "Welcome. Sit a while." She stood there for a long time. Then she went inside and made 4 dozen extra biscuits, which was how Mai Cooper said the things she didn't have words for. She had been saying them that way for 43 years, and everyone who mattered understood the language. The house roof was finished in 2 days. Tank's older brother ran Ridge Roofing. Bossy brought his full crew and wouldn't hear a word about payment. They arrived Tuesday morning and were done by Wednesday evening. Every shingle replaced. Every flashing resealed. The ridge cap straight and true, 3 plumbers from the SMC fixed every pipe in the house. A man from Akron replaced the bedroom window May had patched with cardboard and a piece of plastic sheeting 6 winters ago, the draft coming through it each November like a reminder of everything they fix yet. The window went in on a Thursday. New frame, double pane, sealed tight. The buckets came up off the bedroom floor and went to the curb. May stood in the bedroom and looked at the ceiling. Clean plaster, dry, no water stains, no dark spots waiting to spread. She put her hand flat against it, the way Elias put his hand flat on an engine to listen. "There you are," she said, to the ceiling, which was exactly the right thing to say, and she knew it. 40 members of Iron Ridge MC were working mechanics in their regular lives. Body shop owners, diesel specialists, custom builders, restoration men who flew parts in from 3 states over and charged accordingly. They came in rotating shifts through weeks 2 and 3. Working through Elias's entire backlog in 4 days with the focused efficiency of people who love what they do and rarely get to do it alongside 60 others who feel the same way. Mrs. Hollister's transmission, done. The Patterson kit fully overhauled. Every fluid changed. New belts, new brake pads, tires rotated. Boss Patterson stood in the lot afterward looking at his father's truck for a long time before he could say anything. "What do we owe Mr. Cooper?" "Nothing, son. Not this time." Marcus looked at the truck, then at Elias, then back at the truck. "My daddy built that engine himself in 1987. His voice went careful. "He'd be glad it was you who kept it running." He shook Elias's hand and drove away slowly. "The way you drive something that matters." Old Frank Beaumont's 1967 Chevy pickup. The one Frank ran every few months just to watch Elias work on it, even though Frank never actually drove it, received a full restoration. New upholstery. Paint matched to the original. Every mechanical system rebuilt from the ground up. It ran the way it had run when it left the factory in 1967, which was very well, with the added benefit of being safer. Frank came to pick it up on a Thursday, 91 years old. He stood in the lot and looked at his truck for a while without saying anything. Then, he took his hat off and held it over his chest. "Samuel Cooper's fixed this truck the first time," he said. 1969. Said she'd outlast us both. He put his hat back on. He wasn't wrong. He drove away. Slow and careful, like a man transporting something that cannot be replaced. Which he was. Elias stood in the middle of all of it and did what he had always taught, because that was what his hands knows you how to give, and teaching was the only way to make sure what Samuel had built inside him didn't end when he did. He had a way of pressing a screwdriver handle against a component and putting his ear to the other end, listening through the metal for what the machine was trying to say. His father had taught him. "Don't look, Elias. Listen. A machine will tell you what it needs if you ask it the right way." He said it now to whoever was standing beside him, the younger Iron Ridge members. Devin Marsh, who hadn't been hired yet but had started showing up anyway on day 4 and simply made himself useful until the question of whether he belonged stopped being a question. "Watch," Elias said to them. "Then, don't watch. Listen," and they listened. A 68-year-old black mechanic with arthritis in both knees and 43 years in his hands transfers knowledge that no video and no manual had ever managed to capture, because you cannot capture it. You can only stand beside someone who has it and let it come across the way heat comes across, not by being handed anything, but by being close enough long enough. That is how it has always worked. That is the only way it has ever worked. On day 8, Simone came home for the weekend. She stood in the doorway of her great-grandfather's shop and turned in a slow circle, taking in the new lift, the new lighting, the benches, the compressor, the tool wall, granddaddy. It looks exactly like it always did." She kept turning, except new, Elias said. "Yeah," she stopped turning, looked at him. "How? People came. What people? The right kind." She walked to the tool wall, stood in front of it, ran her eyes along the row of handles, different metals, the shapes she had known since before she could read. Then she looked up at the photograph of Samuel Cooper above the workbench. Then at the board on the shelf beside it, she walked to the board. "Read it. Read it again. He would have loved this." "He does," Elias said. "He said it the way you say something you actually believe. Not for comfort, not for the sound of it, because it was true and he knew it, and the knowing felt like the most solid thing in the room." Simone graduated in June, first in her class. Elias sat in the 3rd row of the gymnasium with grease still under 2 fingernails because he had not wanted to be late and had not had time to scrub properly, and he did not care even slightly. May cried from the moment Simone's name was called until approximately 45 minutes after they got home, which was her right. In August, Simone left for Purdue. The scholarship conversation had happened the previous December on a Sunday evening. After dinner, breezeway. 3 mugs. Simone with her tea the way she'd always had it since she was 12 and decided coffee was for later in life. The roses that had been planted in week 7 were already putting out new growth along the lattice. Small, determined green shoots reaching toward whatever was up there. Elias S. slid the envelope across the table. Simone opened. Read it. Put it down. Picked up. Read it again more slowly, the way you read something when the first pass doesn't convince you it's real. She set it down. Granddaddy. This is. She looked up. Eyes wet. This is everything. I know. Who would she stopped? Started over. Why would they? Because you earned it, May said, from across the table. Simple and final, the way May said the things that didn't require elaboration. And because we had a Saturday night that changed some things. And because sometimes the world makes sense. She picked up her mug. Don't argue with it. Sign whatever you need to sign. Simone pressed her lips together. Nodded once, the firm kind. The kind that means a decision has been made and she's going to hold it. Then she started crying. And May Cooper, who had been waiting since that Purdue letter arrived to be allowed to cry about it herself, who had been holding the weight of 67 sobs and a bank notice and a granddaughter's future in her chest for 2 months without putting it down once, let herself cry too. Elias watched his wife and his granddaughter crying at the table in the breezeway and thought about $67 in a cash box, about a face-down bank notice, about a man named Samuel burning words into wood at night and hiding them inside a wall where nobody would find them unless the wall came down. He picked up his coffee. Let the women cry. It was the most productive thing happening in the breezeway right now, and he had learned over 43 years that his job in moments like this one was to be present and quiet and not make it about himself. He was very good at that job. Later, after Simone had gone to bed and the breezeways was just the two of them again with the night air and the highway going quiet, May said, "She's going to be all right, baby." "I know. She's going to be more than all right. I know that, too." May clinked her mug against his. They sat until the coffee was gone, and then a little while after that, because the breezeway at night was one of the best places either of them had ever been. The reopening was on a Sunday. 11 weeks after the storm, the whole town came. And when we say it's the whole town, we mean the people who had been there for 43 years, and the people who had never stopped by 4, and the people who had read about it in the Columbus paper and driven down because they wanted to see for themselves whether a story like this one was actually true. It was banners across the breezeway, a red ribbon, folding chairs set up in the lot. The mayor gave a speech that ran 4 minutes longer than it needed to and contained the phrase unprecedented community partnership 3 times, which Bones endured from the back row with the expression of a man containing himself for a specific and time-limited purpose. 80 Iron Ridge members in full formation. Bikes lined up in the new lot with the precision of men who take that kind of thing seriously. Simone cut the ribbon. In the photograph that ran on the front page of the Columbus paper the next morning, you could see Simone with the scissors, grinning. Elias to her left with his hand on her shoulder. May to her right, already crying, attempting to disguise it behind her coffee mug with partial success. Bones behind them with his silver beard and his dark glasses and the expression of a man trying very hard not to feel anything and failing completely. He almost made it. Cole was there, cast off now. Walking without the crutch, moving a little more carefully than he used to, but moving. After the speeches and the ribbon and the crowd spilling into the diner and the garage, he found May by the coffee station. He was carrying something, a small, frame simple wood. He held it out without a word. May took it, a child's drawing. Crayons. A man with a big beard on a motorcycle, beard extending down past the frame's edge the way a child draws things when the detail matters more than the boundary. A woman in an apron with yellow hair. Lily's interpretation, generous with color. A house behind them, with a bright red heart drawn on the roof, filled in completely, not an outline. Across the bottom, in the careful, deliberate printing of a child who knows this is important. Thank you for saving my daddy. Love, Lily. May stood holding it. Cole watched her. She drew it the day after I got home, Sakami said. Sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Let me see it until she was done. His voice was doing its thing. The slightly rough thing it did when he was holding something in. She said, "Daddy, I need to send this to the people who kept you here." May looked up at him. She said that. She said exactly that. May looked at the drawing again, at the yellow-haired woman in the apron holding something that might be a spatula or might be a spoon. At the heart on the roof, filled in red all the way to the edges. "I'm going to hang this behind the counter. I was hoping you'd say that." She hung it that afternoon, behind the counter, eye level, where she could see it from the griddle every single day. It is still there. The story didn't stay local, By Tuesday, the Columbus paper's front page had been shared enough that a regional wire picked it up. By Friday, it was national. By the following Monday, the video clip, shot by the photographer in the leather vest who'd ridden up with the convoy on that first Wednesday, the one who'd stood quietly in the lot and said nothing and seen everything, had 9 million views. People left comments in 14 languages. A woman in Glasgow said she missed her bus stop because she was crying on it. A retired schoolteacher in Tennessee read the story to her class, and 3 students asked if they could write letters to the Coopers. A man in Montana wrote that he had driven past a woman with a flat tire the week before and kept going, and that after reading this story, he had pulled over and thought about it for a long time. He didn't say what he decided, but he stopped and thought about it. That's the kind of story this was, not the kind that makes you feel warm and then lets you go back to normal. The kind that asks you a question you have to answer honestly if you're going to answer at all. 6 doors said no. Would you have been the 7th? Saturdays on Route 9 stopped being quiet. By the 3rd weekend, the lot was full from sunrise. Bikers from 4 states. Couples who drove from Columbus just to sit in May's booths and eat her biscuits. Truckers who rerouted their hauls through Millhaven specifically to pick up a jar of sweet tea for the road because the word had reached Columbus, and beyond that, May's sweet tea was worth the detour. Russ at the gas station quietly put a donation jar on the counter beside his register with an Iron Ridge flyer next to it. No explanation, no sign, just the jar and a flyer. It filled up most Saturday. The hardware store town, which it had been thinking about closing, didn't. It added 2 employees instead. The diner across the highway hired 3 new staff. Millhaven, which had been contracting slowly for a decade, found itself with a reason for people to stop. The town shifted, not all at once, not with an announcement. The way they shifts in October, you don't see it moving. You look up one afternoon and realize it's different than it was an hour ago, and you can't say exactly when it changed. Devin Marsh arrived on a Thursday morning in December, 6 weeks after the reopening. 22 years old. He had driven 2.5 hours from outside Cincinnati. He knocked on the bay door at 7:45. Elias was under a hood and didn't look up. "We're not open yet." "I know, sir, I'm not a customer." Elias looked up. Devin Marsh, young. Work boots worn in the honest way that takes actual work to achieve. A piece of paper in his hand, a printout of the Columbus paper article, folded and refolded so many times the creases had gone soft. "Mr. Cooper, my name is Devin Marsh. I've been doing body work and engine repair since I was 16. I drove up from Cincinnati because he started over. It's because it's worth saying right, because I want to learn from you. If you'll have me." Elias looked at the young man. At the boots, at the calluses on his hands, which told more than the paper did. "You eat breakfast?" "Not yet, sir. Go next door. Tell May I sent you. Come back when you're done." Devin looked at him. "Does that mean it means go eat breakfast, son? We'll talk after." Devin Marsh went next door. Came back 35 minutes later, which was slightly longer than expected, because May had asked him questions, and he had answered them, and she had given him Siniska biscuit and asked more questions, which was May's interview process and had been for 43 years. He had the job before he sat down at the workbench. May sent him home every night for 2 years with biscuits wrapped in foil and a reminder about what to eat and when, because she had decided he wasn't eating enough, and that was something she could fix and therefore would. She hired Sandra Pruitt 2 weeks after Devin started. 34 years old, single mother of 2 boys. She had been doing the math off on rent versus groceries for 8 months in a way that was not going to resolve in her favor. May paid her above minimum wage, sent her home every night with whatever was left in the warming tray. Not as charity, as employment. Because May Cooper understood the difference between those 2 things and knew that getting the difference right was everything. Sandra cried in her car on her first payday. She called her mother and said something her mother repeated to May 6 months later, quietly at the counter. She said, "Mama, somebody finally treated me like I was worth something." May didn't repeat that to Elias for a while. When she did, it was in bed, in the dark, the way the important things always got said. He didn't answer right away. Then, "Your daddy used to say the best use of a door is to keep it open." May took his hand in the dark. "I didn't know your daddy. He would have liked you. Of course he would have." She settled against the pillow. "I make excellent biscuits." Glenn Pruitt came back on a Tuesday morning in January, not night, not quietly. He walked up through the door of May's table at 7:15 and sat at the counter, second stool from the left. May set a mug in front of him, said nothing. He looked at the mug, at his hands. "I'd like to pay for my coffee." That's generally how it works. He stopped. Tried again. I'd like to be a regular customer. If that's something that's that. He stopped again, if that's possible. Hey, May, set the pot down. You want a biscuit? Yes, ma'am. $2. She brought him the biscuit. He ate it, drank his coffee, left $4 on the counter and walked out without making anything of it. He came back the next Tuesday, and the one after that. Elias watched this happening from the garage doorway over the course of 3 weeks. Didn't say anything. Then, on Tuesday in February, he came over, poured himself a coffee, and sat down 2 stools from Glenn. They didn't speak for a while. Just 2 men at a counter in the morning, which is a thing that doesn't require explanation. Then Glenn said, "Nice lift you've got in the bay. Donated. Good people." Yes. It's another silence. The coffee, the sound of May at the griddle. "My father," Glenn said, cheerful, like a man handling something he doesn't want to drop. "He wasn't a bad man, Mr. Cooper. He made a bad choice, and then he let it become who he was." Elias drank his coffee. "I know men like that. I became one." Elias set his mug down, looked at the counter for a moment. "You came back," he said. Glenn looked at him. "Your father made a bad choice and died with it." Elias picked up his mug. "You made a bad choice and drove back to fix what you could." That's a different story. Glenn was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that isn't empty. That has weight and shape and something moving through it. "Thank you," he said. "Come on Tuesdays." Elias said, "Biscuits are best on Tuesdays." He walked back to the garage. Glenn sat at the counter for another few minutes, finished his coffee, left a proper tip, walked out. He came back on Tuesdays. He still does. Preacher Mason drove down from Mansfield one Saturday a month. He bought an oil change he didn't need and a slice of pie he definitely did. He and Elias rarely said much to each other. Sometimes they talked about engines, sometimes about the weather. Sometimes they just occupied the same space without requiring anything of it. May watched them from the counter and knew exactly what was being said in the nods and the silences. The real conversation. The one underneath the one you could hear. 2 men talking about fathers. About what you inherit, about the things that travel through generations and looking for someone to finally put them down. She watched them and thought about Samuel's board on the shelf above the workbench, about what it meant that he'd hidden it inside the wall, that he'd built the building and put the words inside and never mentioned it to anyone. Just let the building carry them. Some things don't need to be announced. They just need to be true and present and there when the wall comes down. Lily came on weekends, Cole's daughter. 7 years old when this started, 8 by spring. The kind of 9 that showed up in a hurry, as if she'd decided in advance that she wasn't interested in taking her time about things. She sat on a milk crate in the bay and asked questions at a rate that Elias found genuinely impressive, having spent 68 years around people who thought they asked a lot of questions. What's that do? Holds the valve closed when the why does it need to close? Because if it stays open, what happens if it stays open, Lily? What? Hand me that ratchet. She handed it over with the pride of someone who knows which ratchet is which she did, because she had been paying attention from the first visit and she didn't see any reason to stop. She called him Granddaddy Cooper, not because anyone told her to. She just decided on her 3rd visit that this was what he was to her, and then it was true because she said it was, which is how certain things become true. One Sunday in October, 1 year, almost to the day, from the night Cole had walked his dead bike up the driveway in the rain, Lily fell asleep in the bay. Cheek against a tire, hands curled under her chin, out completely the way children sleep when they feel entirely safe. Elias carried her into the pantry. May put her down on the cot and the back room and covered her with the quilt she had sewn the winter Simone was born. She stood looking at Lily for a moment, the small face, the hands that fit inside a grown man's palm with room to spare. "Lily, she's 7. May smoothed the edge of the quilt, tucked it in at the sides the way you tuck in something you want to stay. "There you go, baby," she said, soft, to the room. Then she walked back to the counter, poured herself a coffee, and did not say anything to anyone about what had just moved through her. Because some things are not for saying. They're for feeling completely and then carrying quietly the way you carry anything that matters. 1 year after the storm, October, the first official Iron Ridge MC Trade and Engineering Scholarship was awarded to a young woman named Tasha Brooks, 23 years old. Studying diesel mechanics at Millhaven Community College. Single mother, taking night classes while her own mother watched the baby. She had applied because Simone had told her about it. Simone had told her in the parking lot of the community college in September, after stopping to help Tasha with a flat tire, and had written the application deadline on a napkin and pressed it into her hand. The second scholarship went to Marisol Garza, 18 years old, wanted to be a chef. Had the kind of instincts in she kitchen that May recognized immediately because she had sown these same instincts at that age and knew what they were worth and what they needed to become what they could be. Elias handed them their certificates at May's table. Standing behind the counter, Samuel's photograph above the workbench visible through the pass-through window. Lily's drawing behind him on the wall. May gave each of them a peach pie, still warm, and one line, the same line for both of them because it was the only line that mattered. Now go, baby, and don't forget the rule. Simone was home for fall break when it happened. She'd been in the bay all morning working on a transmission, parts spread on a clean mat in the sequence Elias had taught her. Nothing out of order, nothing unaccounted for. The way her great-grandfather had worked, the way her grandfather worked, the way she was going to work. A foggy October morning, 5:20. The sun not up yet. Elias already in the bay with the coffee on the workbench. May's biscuits going in the new oven next door. He heard the car before he saw it. Something wrong in the engine sound. Laboring, a belt going. Steam off the hood, maybe. He stepped to the bay door, watched headlights come through the fog slowly, the way you move when you're not sure you're going to make it. The car limped into the lot. Old sedan. The kind of old that happens when someone has been maintaining it through optimism and prayer and not much else. The driver got out. Young woman, early 20s. A blazer from a thrift rack that had been carefully ironed. Flat shoes. Hair done. Eyes red in the way that comes from crying in the car for a while and then stopping because you can't arrive crying. She was holding a piece of paper. Folded. Held with both hands. She walked toward the bay door. She saw Elias. "Sir, I don't have any money." Her voice was doing its best under the circumstances. "I have a job interview in Columbus in 2 hours. It's a real one." A pause, the first real one. "Please, is there—"
Anyway, Elias held up one hand, gentle, the same hand he had held up to Cole Briggs in the rain exactly 1 year ago, almost to the day.
"Pop the hood, sweetheart." May appeared in the breezeway doorway. She took one look, the blazers. The ironed carefully. The red eyes and the piece of paper held in both hands. She said what she always said to anyone who arrived at her door, in need of something she could give. "Honey, when did you last eat?" The girl couldn't answer, because the answer was the kind that does things to a person's face they can't control, and she'd used up her composure getting dressed this morning. May nodded once. "Come sit at the counter. Biscuits coming up. Coffee's on. He'll have you moving before it cools. Fortisant. Tightened hose. A belt from Elias' scrap pile, every fluid topped off, tires checked, windshield wipers replaced because they were streaking, and she was driving into fog, and she needed to be able to see where she was going." The girl came out of May's table with 2 biscuits in her and a paper bag in her hand. 2 more biscuits, May said, handing it over. An apple. A hard-boiled egg. "You eat the egg before you go in. Protein settles your nerves." The girl looked at the bag. "I don't know how to." "Don't try," May said. "Just go get that job." The girl reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Held it toward Elias. "Collateral. Until I can come back and pay you for." Elias pressed something into her palm instead. She looked down. A business card. Cooper's Garage. The new logo. She turned it over, his handwriting on the back. Careful. The same thing he had written on the card he gave Simone the day she left for Purdue, which Simone still kept on her desk in her dorm room next to her great-grandfather's apron. "You don't owe us. Pass it on someday." The girl looked up. She was trying to find the words for this. For a foggy October morning on Route 9, and a man who fixed her car without asking for anything, and a woman who packed her a lunch, and a card that said she didn't owe anyone anything except forward. She couldn't find them. Wished was the right response. Because some things aren't supposed to be wrapped up in language right away. Some things are supposed to stay open for a while. She got in her car. The engine started clean. She pulled out of the lot, and the tail lights went into the faucet and got smaller and disappeared. Simone's looked up from the transmission. "Granddaddy. Grandma." She looked between them. "You didn't charge her." May came through the breezeway, wiped her hands on her apron. Looked at Simone with the particular patience of a woman who has been waiting for this exact question. "Baby, yeah, 60 men that everyone in this county was afraid of came down this road and rebuilt this garage from the inside out. Got you through 4 years of engineering school." She picked up her coffee. "You think we charged that girl for a belt and a biscuit?" Simone looked at her grandmother, then at her grandfather, then at the parts spread on the mat in front of her. Everyone in its place, everyone count out for, the whole system laid out so you could see how it worked and what each piece was for. She picked up a component, turned it in her hands, sat down in its place. "No," she said, "I guess we don't." She went back to work. Elias caught May's eye across the bay. She raised her mug, he raised his. From somewhere out on Route 9, faint through the fog, the sound of Harleys, SATA riders heading south. One of them tapped the horn twice as they passed Cooper's Garage, the way Iron Ridge members always did now when they came through. 2 taps. In greeting. in acknowledgement, in the shorthand that had developed between people who didn't need to explain themselves to each other anymore. Lasasse and May went to the breezeway, 2 mugs, 2 chairs. The morning light coming through the fog in the slow way it does in October, not burning it off so much as gradually persuading it. The bronze plaque by the front door caught the early sun. Bones had paid for it himself, had shown up one morning with it under his arm, and a man with a drill had installed it without ceremony or announcement. This place stayed open because 2 people answered the door when no one else's would. The Iron Ridge MC with gratitude. Forever. May clinked her mug against Elias's. Morning, sugar. Morning, baby. The fog was thinning. The road was clearing. Somewhere out there, a young woman in a careful blazer was driving toward Columbus with 2 biscuits and a hard-boiled egg and a card that told her she didn't owe anyone anything except the obligation to pass it forward. Somewhere out there, Simone Cooper was figuring out a transmission and becoming the engineer that Samuel Sam Cooper's granddaughter had always been meant to be, working in the bay her great-grandfather built with his tools on the wall and his words on the shelf and his photograph watching over all of it. Somewhere out there, Lily was waking up on a Saturday and already asking questions before her feet hit the floor. Somewhere, Preacher Mason was loading his bike. Glenn was making coffee and thinking about Tuesdays. Devin Marsh was already in the bay before the sign flipped to open, because that was just who he was. And on Route 9 in Millhaven, Ohio, 2 buildings and a house behind them. A breezeway with roses coming in. A tool wall that hadn't changed since 1960. A board on a shelf that said what it needed to say. A child's drawing behind the diner counter. A plaque by the door. And 2 people in 2 chairs with 2 mugs, the way they had been every morning for 44 years, because some things don't need to change. Some things just need to continue, because that's what a door is, not the wood, not the hinge, not the sign that says open or closed. A door is the decision you make when someone is standing on the other side of it. And once you learn to make the decision without flinching, without checking first whether the person on the other side looks like someone you expected, you can't unmake it. You don't want to. 6 doors said no on a Saturday night in October. A 7th says yes. And a 68-year-old mechanic and his wife who poured the coffee before she counted the coins, they didn't do it for what came after. They didn't know what came after. They did it because a man was sick and needed help, and it was raining and they had a door. That was the whole of it, and the whole of it turned out to be enough. Morning, sugar. Morning, baby. 44 years. Still counting.